I've been doing the boring task that seemingly no one else wants to do, reading through this 28-page document produced by the Government of Ontario here in Canada. And it's clear now that they are deceiving us, the taxpayers, but especially drivers, who think that this bill will benefit them. And that's laughable because it's not going to. It's going to make things worse. Governments around the world are implementing diabolical legislations like these, all in plain sight. Each of these 28 pages is a piece of evidence, except for this one. It's blank. Not helpful at all. But the other 27 pages lead us to ask a very important question. Why isn't anyone else talking about what's on the other 27 pages? Why is it that everyone, including news outlets and Doug Ford's provincial government, have been talking about nothing but bike lanes for the last month?
Bike lanes may be celebrated by those who rely on them, but many see them as roadblocks impeding local access.
In all my years of living here, I have not seen anything unite the locals like the rejection of the bike lanes.
And that's just a small little section out of these 28 pages of this Bill 212 document.
Wow, that is darker than I thought it was going to be. Whoops.
Like right here on page number 1 of this act, in big, bold, oversized font, is the description of Bill 212, which is, and it's funny because it's really hard to say, an act to enact 2 acts and amend various acts with respect to highways, broadband-related expropriation, and other transportation-related matters. 2 takeaways. That's a mouthful, and no wonder people haven't read this because it's boring. But 2, have you heard what I just read said by anyone? Because I haven't. I have just been hearing about bike lanes endlessly and how they're the scourge of Toronto, which they're not, but so many other videos cover that I'm not going to be talking really about bike lanes today. I'm going to be talking about the other 27 pages. I haven't heard much about anything else other than bike lanes. And of course, bike lanes are important, especially protected ones. And Doug wanting to rip them up, not good. But there are a lot of videos that cover that and all of the negativities surrounding that. But to be honest, most people really don't give a shit about them. But before you hate on me for saying that, you should check out the rest of my channel and videos because I'm all about utility cycling. But it's true, most people here in Ontario who are drivers don't really care about bike lanes, or at least they don't realize they should. They just care about their little lives. People's lives are really small, and if they are driving every single day, because reasons, and because of all of our infrastructure that is set up that way to make driving the most convenient thing, and everything for the last 80 years has been set up so that driving is the only option that seems like the only reliable, viable option to get around, well, that's because we built it that way. So that is what people do. So that is why the majority of people don't care about bike lanes. But with all the talk about bike lanes in the news, it only takes up 1 page out of all of the 28 pages of this legislation. And to even find that, you have to flip all the way down to page 22 where it's buried, right here. Now, to illustrate how small of a section this bike lanes bit is, I made a pie chart with my trusty old spreadsheet. See that sliver of red? That represents the portion of the document devoted to bike lanes. See the massive yellow and pink chunks taking up over 80% of the pages of Bill 212? Yeah, those are the Highway 413 Act and Building Highways Faster Act 2024. That's the part hiding in plain sight. The part that he, Doug Ford, doesn't want you to focus on. And he's succeeded. And the worst part is, while Bill 212 says that its goals are to reduce gridlock and save you time, it'll do neither. Now, Premier Doug Ford has never been one to let facts get in the way of his decision-making.
No, that's a bunch of hogwash. I know the city like the back of my hand.
Nor has he ever been one to miss a chance to line the pockets of his lil buddies. But don't take it from me. Here's a little clip from the Auditor General of Ontario saying that
our review of the procedures used to amend the Greenbelt boundary in 2022 raises serious concerns about the exercise used, the way in which standard information gathering and decision-making protocols were sidelined were abandoned, and how changes to the Greenbelt boundaries were unnecessarily rushed through. This selection exercise effectively excluded substantive input from many subject matter experts in the housing ministry and other ministries and municipalities, First Nation leaders, and the public. More troubling still, the process was biased in favor of certain developers and landowners who had timely access to the housing minister's chief of staff. Owners of the 15 land sites removed from the Greenbelt could ultimately see more than a collective $8.3 billion increase to the value of their properties.
Doug Ford is putting on a masterclass in deception in 3 acts. So, let's dive in. This is going to get interesting. Act 1, setting the trap. If you already know how this trap was set, you can skip ahead to Act 2. But for those who haven't, here is how it plays out. Anyone who's ever driven in Toronto knows that the congestion is terrible there. Duh! Doug is banking on you being pissed off. The part of Highway 401 that passes through Toronto is recognized as the busiest and widest highway in North America. Toronto was recently ranked on the list of the world's most congested cities in the world, behind only London, UK, and Dublin. Wow. Good job, Toronto. How did this happen, though? Well, in the 1950s, cities everywhere, but especially in North America, thought that bigger highways would speed up traffic, and that adding more lanes would speed it up even more. So when the Toronto section of Highway 401 opened in 1956, it was described by one reporter as a motorist's dream, providing some of the most soothing scenery in the metropolitan area. But just 3 years later, things were a different story, as 85,000 drivers crowded the roadway designed to handle a maximum of 48,000 vehicles daily. So what did the Department of Highways try to do to solve this problem? They began widening the section of highway that was the problem to 12 lanes, beginning in 1963. And we all know how that turned out. Gridlock! Endless gridlock! See, every time roads are widened anywhere around the world, not just Toronto, congestion eases initially, but very quickly, the freshly widened roads fill up again, promptly followed by more road widening, which means more construction, by the way, and then more congestion just follows it up. This process has been well documented and is called induced demand. Basically, it means build it and they will come. It has been proven time and time again to lead to traffic congestion. So we gotta ask, how will this end? Will every square inch of land be paved over? Is there not another way? What's being done elsewhere? That's what we really have to ask. Because over in Copenhagen, one of the most bicycle-friendly cities in the world, Copenhageners travel over 1.4 million kilometers by bicycle each day. What? That's like bonkers. In Toronto, not so much, but they're trying. Bike lanes are being built. Ridership is actually climbing. Just imagine for a second, the population of Copenhagen, which is 1.3 million people, all commuted by car each day. What would their streets look like? Actually, we have an answer. Unfortunately, it would look like Toronto's streets. Then there's Tokyo, with a population of over 14 million residents within the city proper and 41 million people in the greater Tokyo area, making it the most populous metropolitan city in the world. So how do that many people in Tokyo get around? You probably heard about this, but by train. Just imagine if all 41 million people in the greater Tokyo area decided to travel by car. It's literally laughable. Like, that would never happen. But it would be a disaster. Kind of like Toronto. From these 2 brief examples, we can see that there are other ways to deal with traffic flow problems. But Doug doesn't want you to know that. He doesn't want you to care about that because he doesn't think that that's a possibility, even though all of the science and facts are against him. He wants you to focus on the gridlock in Toronto and believe that building more roads, more lanes, is the only solution for the whole province, even though we know that isn't true. Also, before we go dive into this bill, very deeply. I want to take a moment to talk to the drivers watching this specifically right now. No one is asking people who need or want to drive to give it up. All people want is to have more options so that people aren't forced to drive. And the majority of people are forced to drive by not having other viable, reliable, and affordable options to get around other than to buy an expensive car, start driving, and become even more traffic. We have to start understanding this. I understand that some people will need or still want to drive, like trades workers or delivery trucks or any other number of people, really. But wouldn't it be nice for all those cars and trucks around you with one driver in them to just vanish? Because they would be able to take a delightful bus or train or bike or combination of all of those. Like, this is about getting people who could otherwise get out of cars out of them so that they're less traffic. Okay, on to Act 2. Now let's spring this trap. Remember, for this to work, Doug and his gang have to get you looking in one direction while they maneuver in another. And so they did. Here's the timeline of that. On September 19th, 2024, CBC News reported that the Ontario government was considering legislation that could stop new bike lanes and remove existing bike lanes. On September 20th, Cycle Toronto launched a I Love Bike Lanes petition. Obviously, people who routinely ride bikes didn't like having their bike lanes threatened. It totally makes sense, but the diversion is working. No one was talking about the other things on Bill 212. About a month went by, and then on October 15th, Ontario officially announced that it wanted to introduce legislation that would require provincial approval for municipal bike lanes. Again, note that wording. Nothing is said about the other things on the bill. Ontario's Transportation Minister, Prabmeet Sakaria, said that municipalities would need to demonstrate that any proposed bike lanes would not have a negative impact on vehicle traffic, according to the province. The government will also request data from municipalities on bike lane projects initiated in the last 5 years. After that, things got heated, especially in Toronto, but people across the province got worried, including me. And that's kind of all I was focused on. Because this isn't just a Toronto thing. This is a province-wide thing. And oh my goodness, Ontario is not Toronto. Now, on October 21st, 2024, Bill 212, Reducing Gridlock, Saving You Time, 2024, was formally tabled and open for official public feedback for 30 days. Then on November 9th, the provincial government started rushing this legislation through by skipping the second reading so that this could be enacted before Christmas break. Doug is also rushing public consultation. The irony is that after all of this rush, it will take years to build the highways, and in the end, 1, it won't save anyone time, especially drivers, and 2, it won't relieve gridlock. So it won't do the 2 things that the Ford government promised. So why would the Ford government do this? Well, because he knows that gridlock is something that most people can identify with, whereas bike lanes and the environment are just not at the top of most people's list of problems they want the government to solve because they're not something that's in their face. And he knows that. And he knows that cycling advocates and environmental groups can more easily be marginalized than drivers. His game plan? Ram through legislation to build highways faster, claiming that it will help people by saving them time and reducing gridlock, while simultaneously disregarding environmental concerns and reducing the viability of other modes of transportation. He figures that he will score a win in the short term by immediately ripping up the bike lanes on Bloor and Yonge and University Ave, even though it won't work. Because 1, construction is going to cause chaos. 2, the newly opened lanes will fill with traffic the very next day. But you probably knew that by now. And the building of the 413 that he isn't talking about very much will take years to build, only for it to be proven again sometime in the distant future that building more highways or widening existing ones does not and will never work. But that'll be long after he's funneled your hard-earned taxpayer money into the pockets of strategically chosen developers and landowners and investors. And maybe his too. Later, I'll actually tell you a bit more about the billions of taxpayer dollars that went into Highway 407, which was then sold off to a private consortium by the Conservative government. So, that is probably going to happen again with the 413, right? Yeah, not a lot of faith that won't happen again. So what's in Bill 212? Bill 212 is comprised of 5 sections, which are named schedules, which are like topics covered in an essay, and this essay dictates what the province can do. Once this bill passes, what's in these documents become legally binding provincial law. And those 5 schedules are amendments, so changes to the Building Broadband Faster Act 2021, enacting the Building Highways Faster Act 2024, enacting the Highway 413 Act 2024, amendments to the Hwy Traffic Act, and amendments to the Towing and Storage Safety and Enforcement Act 2021. Each of them with lovely, easy to understand, non-gibberish wording. I am kidding, it's dense, I drooled a lot. But here's that pie chart once again that breaks down how many pages each schedule covers. So not a lot about bike lanes and a lot about Highway 413 and building highways faster. And right as we dive into this, do note that I am not a lawyer and I'm just trying to understand this myself and then convey my understanding to you in an easy to understand, for the most part, way. Bill 212, Schedule 1, Building Broadband Faster Act 2021. This schedule is about amendments of the bill from 2021 so that expropriation of land along current and new highways for broadband projects like internet can happen. Because highways are not just isolated asphalt chunks, there's a lot that goes into making and maintaining them. And I have to ask, why do highways like this Highway 413 need internet connection? Because they will be tolled. And in order to toll highways, you need to have internet connection and cameras and other infrastructure to toll the heck out of you. The Ontario government has consistently avoided saying that the highway won't be tolled, and it's going to follow a very similar route as Ontario's existing 407 toll highway, which is both expensive and underutilized. And then there's stuff about making it easier for the government to expropriate land without some of the usual rules. On to Schedule 2, which is aimed at expediting or speeding up the construction of specific high-priority highway projects in Ontario. Key projects like the 413, the Bradford Bypass, Garden City Skyway Bridge twinning, and other projects as specified by future regulations. To do that, the provincial government is making it so that landowners who have land taken away from them for these highway projects can't request a change to the possession date under the Expropriations Act.
That is a lot.
This rule simplifies the expropriation process for priority highway construction, but also means that, hey bud, nice property, it's ours now. Pack your things and get out by this date. Next up is Schedule 3, my least favorite. This schedule specifically focuses on the construction and environmental processes related to Highway 413. It sets special rules to streamline the project. It creates an atrocious exemption from Environmental Assessment Act. And the 413 and related projects, including early construction work, are exempt from the usual requirements of the Environmental Assessment Act. This makes it easier and faster to move forward with the highways development at the expense of the planet. And if you don't care about the environment, then I guess you don't mind the floods, fires, and hail, and high winds, and associated insurance premium hikes on your already high home and auto insurance, eh? Like, if you don't believe it, that's fine, but the insurance companies do, and you have to pay them. Or when your home literally is uninsurable because of damage done to our ecosystem, yeah, good luck with that. I'm sure you'll care then. And then there's all of the rest of this stuff, like environmental impact assessment compliance and environment impact assessment process, and sections 4 to 9 of the Act lay out the steps of this customized environmental assessment process and publication requirements. Whew. I'm curious about those last few because once they have started this whole project for 413, I'm sure they'll just keep trudging along, destroying everything in their way, and then claiming that they can't stop now. We've already clear-cut everything. It doesn't make sense to stop now. Think of all the wasted money. Think about the congestion. Now on to Schedule 4, the one that's causing all the ruckus in the news and the cycling community. Driver's license and test fees are the first part, and then we get to the approval for bicycle lanes. Municipalities must now get approval from the ministry before building bicycle lanes in some cases. This adds an extra step to ensure that new bike lanes meet provincial requirements or standards. On the surface, kind of sounds maybe reasonable, but not at all if you dive like a millimeter down. In more detail here, in the circumstances described in subsection 2, a municipality shall not construct, install, or mark a bicycle lane on a highway or part of a highway under its jurisdiction and control unless the design for the bicycle lane has been approved by the ministry, and in considering whether to give such approval, the ministry may require information from the municipality, yay bureaucracy, including traffic information related to the design for bicycle lanes and the highway. Do note that highways are all roads in like Ontario. I believe that's how it works. So a highway isn't really like a freeway. It's highways. I don't know why it's phrased that way, but highways are all the roads. So there's highways and then there's highways. Really differentiated. Good job, Ontario. So we head over to subsection 2 now. Subsection 1 applies where A, the design for the bicycle lane would reduce the number of marked lanes available for travel by motor vehicle traffic along any portion of or on either side of the highway where the bicycle lane is to be located. And B, the municipality is prescribed by regulation for the purposes of subsection 1. Subsection 3 is about transitioning here on the screen. Kind of long, won't read that. I've already rambled enough. And then subsection 4 is consideration of traffic flow. So when considering whether to approve the design for the construction of a bicycle lane, the ministry may consider whether it would unduly diminish the orderly movement of motor vehicle traffic. And the cherry on top is subsection 5. In the circumstances described in subsection 6, the ministry may require municipalities to provide traffic information relating to an existing bicycle lane on a highway under its jurisdiction and control, and the municipality shall comply with the request. It is also worth noting that in this act, bicycle lane includes any portion of a highway, the use of which is wholly or partially restricted or dedicated to bicycles. So multi-use pathways may not actually be a way around this absurd law, as some have suggested online. And finally, Schedule 5 is just about amending a 2021 act that goes over towing and storage and enforcement, so like reducing the predatory nature of tow truck drivers. Yay! It's not bad. On to Act 3 now, the aftermath. Long-term traffic gridlock. Now that we got through the snorefest of legislation, let's talk a bit more about Highway 413. But first, some context. Even though the Ford government touts the Highway 413 as the way to reduce congestion, internal documents from the Ministry of Transportation itself show that even with the 413, crushing gridlock is ahead. Leading transport experts concur that Doug already knows this. The 413 is not a silver bullet. Eric Miller, the director of University of Toronto's Transportation Research Institute, said that this highway is, in my view, as much of a development play as anything. We know this government loves its developers. I can't help but believe that the major impetus for this is to open up these lands to development, which will just make congestion worse. And it'll be worse than what's being projected here. That's because the development that is expected around the highway will generate more traffic, more congestion, and more auto dependency. We have 60 years of experience saying that it doesn't work, and yet this government is locked into that mentality. Stephen Farber, a University of Toronto professor who studies the social and economic outcomes of transportation and land use decision-making, said one of the most striking findings in the government documents is that the 407 is expected to remain underused because the modeling assumes it remains tolled, which, I mean, it probably will because it's a private company. The government sold it. I'll get into that in a moment. These folks are struggling because of traffic, but there's a perfectly empty highway that they should be using in the meantime. And they don't because of tolls. So how much will Highway 413 cost? The province's Auditor General found that in 2022, it would likely cost more than $4 billion. Opposition parties have said that the true cost is closer to $10 billion. By the way, there are 16 million people in Ontario. So 16 million people divided by $10 billion is about $625 per person. But there are kids and seniors who aren't paying taxes, so let's round up to the highway basically costing every taxpayer in the province of Ontario, Canada, about $1,000. That's just some napkin math, but the money has to come from somewhere, right? $10 billion doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It's coming from your pocket because you're a taxpayer and you live in Ontario. Here are the stats. In 1950, there were 100 million cars on the planet. Today, there are over 1 billion cars. Like it or not, the only real way to reduce congestion is to reduce the number of cars and consider other options. But we have to have those options. And by the way, if you don't like that, think selfishly. Because cars, trucks, vans, diesel, gas, insurance, maintenance, and endless other things are getting more and more expensive every year. So why is the government making you ever more reliant on things that are keeping you in the hole, keeping you poor? This taxpayer money could be used for actual solutions like high-frequency, high-speed rail lines that are heavily subsidized to induce demand, get you out of the car and onto a nice, relaxing ride while you can do work remotely or listen to a podcast, an audiobook, or pass out and set an alarm so that when you wake up close to work, you can get off and wander over to work. Oh, so many options, so many, but we're not investing in them. So with all of those numbers in mind, what does history tell us about the past government performance when it comes to highway building? Well, let me introduce to you a nice case study. Let's look at the massively underutilized Highway 407. At 151.4 kilometers long, it is the fourth largest expressway in Ontario's 400 series network of highways. Highway 407 was planned in the late 1950s as a freeway bypassing the Toronto segment of the Highway 401, which was the busiest highway in North America. The 407's initial construction cost was pegged at $1.5 billion taxpayer dollars. However, construction did not begin until 1987 and lasted 14 years. It was then sold for just $3.1 billion in 1999 to a consortium of Canadian and Spanish investors before the final segment had even opened in 2001. By 2010, the value of the Highway 407 was estimated to be $9 billion, and by 2019, it was $32.5 billion. And how long will the private investors own this cash cow for? Until 2098, under a 99-year lease. Awesome! Great job, Ontario. Good job, government. This was one of the worst financial missteps by any government in Ontario's history. So, to recap, Highway 401 was built to bypass Toronto. Then, Highway 407 was built to bypass the 401. Now they want to build the 413 to bypass the 407. In other words, Doug wants to build a bypass to bypass the bypass. This would be laughable if it wasn't such a cluster. So expect similar results with Highway 413. A reminder, it will take decades. As I mentioned, the 407 took 14 years to build. And from both a capital expense and maintenance perspective, endless highways are simply fiscally unsustainable and someone's gonna have to be footing the bill eventually. It's like a game of hot potato and 100% of the time the taxpayers are gonna get burnt. Let's briefly talk about time savings. Bill 212 is called the Reducing Gridlock Saving You Time Act. Will Highway 413 really save you travel time? So we already discussed this a little bit. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail here. Building more highways does not reduce traffic, and the Highway 413 build is no exception to that. Despite the project claiming that it would save drivers 30 minutes, an expert panel estimated that the average drive time that people could expect to save would only be about 30 to 60 seconds across the region. But only temporarily. Onto the environmental impact real quick. I thought we saved the Greenbelt. How can Highway 413 be built through it? Unfortunately, the Greenbelt protection legislation allows for infrastructure, so buildings, etc., to be built within the protected zone. If built, the 60-kilometer highway could cut through 2,000 acres of farmland, cross 85 waterways, pave nearly 400 acres of protected Greenbelt land, disrupt 220 wetlands, and impact the habitats of 10 species at risk. Do we really want to destroy our precious environment with a highway that doesn't reduce gridlock and doesn't save us time? Also, how many lanes will Highway 413 be? Well, the Ford government states that it's proposed to be about 4 to 6 lanes. However, the government documents show that they will continue to stay quiet about their plans and are actually considering something much bigger. The Ministry of Transportation has said that the highway will have the potential to expand to 10 lanes by 2041 due to the original 4 to 6 development reaching its capacity. Oh my God, it just keeps on growing. It's like cancer. Holy shit. Real quick, let's get into the economic benefits here. Will the 413 bring more jobs, more infrastructure, and stimulate the economy of nearby communities? The only people who stand to gain from the building of Highway 413 are property developers and land speculators. Many of these are the same developers who were to benefit to the tune of $8.3 billion from the now reversed Greenbelt removals. These government-linked developers stand to make huge profits in their land around where it was designated for development and connected with major highways. So like the 413. As for the bike lane arguments, let's just for a moment ask a simple question. Would removing the bike lanes from Bloor and Yonge and University and downtown Toronto really reduce gridlock and save you time, especially on the 401 and other highways? Really? No. Okay, it won't, and Doug knows that. He knows that the day after the new lanes are open to traffic, motor vehicle traffic, cars, trucks, etc., they will be filled with cars and trucks yet again. No one will save time, and gridlock will not be reduced as promised. Then we have to ask, what will the people who were riding their bicycles in the bike lanes do once those lanes are removed? A lot of bicycle riders will be forced to drive their cars now because they will not have a safe, efficient way of commuting anymore. Do we not see the problem here? Sorry to state the obvious, but the problem is not the bike lanes. The problem is way too many cars. Bill 212 is about getting more cars on the road, which will lead to more traffic for everyone. Okay, that was a super long video, but I wanted to leave no stone left unturned. And even still, there are plenty of stones left unturned. Dang it. To wrap it all up, Bill 212 is being rushed along rapidly. So just like the recent US election, Bill 212 will probably smack us right in the face, going against science and kneecapping Ontarians for decades to come. Now we have to ask, what do we do next? Subscribe, obviously. Well, do that, but also get involved locally. No matter where you are in the world, you as an individual have more power locally than at higher levels of government because you know your city, and the changes that you can fight for will impact you and your neighbors directly. Another thing you can do is check out advocacy groups in both your area, but if you're in Canada, Environmental Defence does extensive research on so many things that I'll simply never have time to cover because of how little time I have as an individual. But they are an awesome organization. Same with the Narwhal, which is a news outlet.
I do want to say kudos and really congratulations to really great investigative reporting, and I believe it came from the Narwhal.
And you should go check them out. Description stuff below. Either way, thank you very much for watching, and if you've gotten this far, holy bejeepers, you really wanted to get this far. Thanks for sticking around. I appreciate it. This was a very long video to make. I'm glad I'm in a random warehouse where there are no windows, so you can't tell how much time has passed, but this video has taken a while to get done. But thanks for sticking around. And before you click this video that YouTube probably wants you to watch, or this one over here, consider going over to the description, becoming a patron to support these videos and future productions, or maybe go ahead and join the YouTube membership for this channel. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great one. Bye-bye.